I'm delighted to be here. I first encountered Roy's work at a conference we held several years ago. It's beautiful. It's really wonderful and I think evocative of our place. As Nancy suggested, I wear two hats, and so I'm going to put on my Associate Dean's hat and provide some greetings from my boss, Dean Daniel O'Connor. He's at another event tonight, or he would be here. He wanted to make sure that I let everyone know that he very much supports what we do at the Center for Public History. He believes in the public-facing humanities mission that we have, in telling our region's history, in recording it, in writing about it, and celebrating it. And so it's my honor on behalf of the college and also for myself to introduce Roy Vu. He earned his PhD at the University of Houston in 2006, so he is a friend. He's now a history professor at Dallas College, North Lake campus. And he's also an advisory board member on an organization that I love, Foodways Texas, and also Keeping Irving Beautiful, where he's the 2018 recipient of the Sadie Ray Graff Education Award. His new book, you see beautiful cover up on the slide, Farm to Freedom, Vietnamese Americans and Their Food Gardens, was released in September 2024 by Texas A&M Press. Dr. Vu?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I am grateful for lending you free time, precious free time, to be here to listen to this book talk. And I truly appreciate your presence. And I also want to thank not only the people, all the people here, of course, but also high school friends who kept me alive back then. So thank you so much. And in addition, just the incredible group of mentors I had at the University of Houston while I was a graduate student, a struggling graduate student who didn't know what to do. And so without their guidance and light, I wouldn't have been standing here right now speaking to you all. And it's great to see Dr. Belosi again. Just saw him a couple of weeks ago at the Urban History Association conference. And so this is just really a truly great honor. And I'm glad to be here. And I hope you will learn something new and interesting during my book talk. Now, as far as the book itself, the story behind the book, let me just go ahead and put a full disclaimer out there. And I always try to do this, make sure I do this at the beginning of each talk, is that I'm not a gardener. I cannot cook to save my life or my wife's life, no matter how hard I try. And so I'm not the expert. My background is on Vietnam War and Asian American history and the Vietnamese diaspora. So in regards to food history and gardening, I'm really a novice in those fields. And as far as in regards to the catalyst behind the book is and Dr. Catherine Yeh from UT Austin said it best. This is a love letter, right, to my parents and to their generation. And speaking of my parents, to the most lovely, important women in my life just walked in, and that's my mom over there in a nice green dress. And she's, without her, obviously, I wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. And the same can be said to my beautiful, lovely wife, Nak. Without her, I wouldn't make it this far for sure. So, and she's, by the way, she's the chef in the house, and she knows a lot more about Vietnamese foodways than I do. And so I'm just a passenger. And again, this is a love story to my parents and my aunts and uncles and the Vietnamese diaspora and the beautiful gardens they cultivate. And as far as how the book came to fruition, this is really thanks in large part to the likes of David Leftwich, Dr. Todd Romero, and Dr. Monica Perales, who I wish was still here at University of Houston. She's just phenomenal as well. And thanks to them, I mean, this book wouldn't have occurred. And as far as the first time I presented on this topic was at the Houston Eats Conference back in 2018, if I recall. And it was just a phenomenal conference, just great lineup of speakers and great food. My wife really enjoyed it, so really great conference overall. It's her favorite conference of all the ones she attended. And sorry to make you attend all those conferences. But as far as the Houston Eats Conference, I was fortunate to run into Stacey Eisenstark, who at the time was the acquisitions editor at Texas A&M University Press, and we just connected. And And then I was lucky to receive a book contract with Texas A&M Press, and from there, for the next 5 years, worked on the book. And as we know, academia, it's a long, arduous process. We're in academia not for fame or for money, for sure, but rather just for the love of the subject, right? And the love for history, and the love to just listen to other people's stories and try to be historically as accurate as possible with those stories. And so this book is about them. This book is about the Vietnamese food gardeners. And so, without further ado, let me go ahead and utilize this clicker and see. Excellent. All right, so as far as the book itself, I want to start with, Vietnam. And I know that in regards to the Vietnamese diaspora, Vietnamese historians, for instance, we are forever tied or bound to the Vietnam War. I remember just traveling, having the good fortune to travel to South America for the first time, and Nak and I visited Chile, and we're trying to basically book a penguin colony tour, and the booking agent was speaking in Spanish, and we tried our best to basically relay the message that we want to book this tour. And he asked where we were from, and we said, well, our parents are from Vietnam. And the first thing that came to his mind was the movie Rambo. And so I mean, for us, we didn't take any offense or anything, and we were more just happily surprised. And for us, it was just this reminder, right, that when people think of Vietnam, they think of the war, right, the Vietnam War, and of course in Vietnam they call it the American War, right, and so we are forever tied to that war, and for people like my parents, they're tied to that war, right, and the traumas that come with war, refuge, resettlement, and racialization, right, those traumas never go away, and so gardening, if anything, helps lessen those traumas as they create a safe haven or a sanctuary, no matter how small it is, to cultivate a variety of fruit trees, herbs, and vegetables. And this tradition, this food practice, stems all the way back from Vietnam, right? Even during the French colonial days and during the Vietnam War. And in this slide here, you can see a number of stamps from the now defunct Republic of Vietnam, right? And so you have these stamps that, of course, would reference the favorite produce that Vietnamese like to grow and consume. And so you have, for instance, bitter melon, and which, by the way, is an acquired taste. I've tried many times to consume bitter melon, and let's just say it's not my favorite. But perhaps this is your favorite for some folks over here in the audience. So it is an acquired taste for me. It tastes like medicine, in other words. So, but it is medicinal. I mean, it is healthy. So people to this day, like my parents and my in-laws, they do cultivate bitter melons. And so for the days of, going back to the days of the Vietnam War, just real briefly here, you have, of course, Vietnamese food gardeners, right? They will find any small plots of land on the side of their homes to cultivate these food gardens. And this food practice doesn't go away when they leave Vietnam. And so in regards to the importance of just maintaining that tradition and preserving and expanding their Vietnamese foodways to future generations, it's part of them, right? It's vital to them, and food is another language, right, that we speak. And I just wanted to share this quote early in the book. Akin to other cultures, food is embodied in Vietnamese heritage, and when Vietnamese American home gardeners dig the soil and plant, raise, nurture familiar crops, they speak an unspoken language with the land they cultivate. And so I compare it to the diacritical marks in the Vietnamese language. If you remove those diacritical marks from Vietnamese words, those words would lose their meaning. And so the herbs and the fruits and vegetables they use to make certain Vietnamese dishes that they are familiar with and that they love to consume and enjoy, well, then you're removing those important ingredients out of their Vietnamese dishes, right? So you take it to a diacritical, so we don't have the herbs, particularly for Vietnamese refugees who came to the United States in the late 1970s and early 1980s. There weren't any, H Marts or any Hong Kong food markets, right? And so they couldn't find such herbs and fruits and vegetables that they loved so much back in the home country of Vietnam. And so as a result, it was obviously very challenging for them to make the Vietnamese dishes they love. But nonetheless, they persevere and they find ways to preserve their own Vietnamese food heritage. And so food is another language, right? And so the diacritical marks are important in the Vietnamese language. So, like the words, the words ma, M-A, it means mother, right? But if you say ma, that means ghost. Okay, so obviously a huge difference. So as a result, I compare it to the herbs that are used, even not just in dishes, but also as garnishes or to flavor condiments like the fish sauce to make nick chum, a dipping sauce. They're vital. They're important, right? Just like the diacritical marks in the Vietnamese language. All right. Moving along. So in regards to refuge, when I did some research in places like University of California, Irvine, Southeast Asia Archive, and Special Collections, I discovered many things, including this little red pocketbook from an unknown oceanic Vietnamese refugee. And we don't know the outcome or the fate of this author or his family, but what we do know that in this little red pocketbook, by the way, that's written in 3 different languages, part Vietnamese, part French, and part English. And one of the things that caught my attention is, I don't know if I can do the laser pointer here, but at the very top left-hand corner of the book, there are 2 words, garlic and onion, which are essential ingredients, right, in cooking, right? And this oceanic refugee would go out of his way to try to find garlic and onion to where he would try to find he would learn the Malaysian translation of these words. And so apparently, as far as for this unknown oceanic refugee, he was looking for onion and garlic, right? And trying to preserve the Vietnamese food ways in refuge, right? And as many of you know, unfortunately, thousands would perish by sea, and those who were land refugees by land as they were trying to make their way to the refugee camps in Thailand. Thousands would perish in hopes of trying to find a host country or a third country to resettle. And many of them would end up in refugee camps for months, even years, and some would be unsettled. In other words, some would remain stuck in those countries where they were first held as refugees. And so as a result, in places like the Philippines, there were a significant number of Vietnamese refugees who would ultimately become stateless when they were never resettled to a third country. So what you have is as a result in these Vietnamese refugee campsites in the Philippines, Malaysia, Hong Kong, etc., you have Vietnamese refugees waiting in chronic uncertainty, right? Not knowing what's going to happen to them, not knowing their fates, right? And to more so than pass the time and more so than to pursue a leisure activity, they would cultivate food gardens, as you can see here at a refugee camp in Malaysia. And here, they're making an attempt, right, to preserve their Vietnamese food ways, in this case, their food practice of cultivating a food garden. And they would try their best to have some kind of sense of normalcy, right, in the midst of refuge, in the midst of uncertainty. And so these food gardens would allow them to have this opportunity to have some kind of normalcy, right, some kind of control over their own lives, even though they know that they have no control over what's going to happen to them. And so they would cultivate these food gardens at refugee camps. And here you have another food garden, this one in Hong Kong. In this one, you have an organized food garden, right? Vườn rau, so in other words, farm or garden. And you have, as a result, in some cases, organized food gardens, right, being cultivated in refugee camps. And then another picture here, you have a food garden in the Philippines, right? And so you have, once again, no matter how minute or small they may be, they remain significant, right? And so these daily, quotidian activities are essential to them, or important to them, right, to remain alive and to remain some sense of normalcy and sanity, right, as they await their outcome. Now, in regards to this quote, here you have gardening allowing Vietnamese American home gardeners to cultivate a homeland duality, right? And in the process, they gain a sense of belonging and earn their culinary citizenship in the United States. The end result for Vietnamese American gardeners is a liberation from the tragedies of war, displacement, and marginalization, and a new sense of freedom found in cultivating a homeland of their own. And so, in other words, you have, going back to the title of the book, Farm to Freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom, liberation from the tragedies of war, displacement, refuge, racialization, resettlement, and unsettlement in some cases, right? And so for Vietnamese refugees, who were fortunate enough to resettle their lives in places like the United States, of course, they would face a host of challenges, right? Being the perpetual foreigners and outsiders and being racialized as well. But nonetheless, they'll try to find ways to cultivate a food garden of their own, right? No matter how small it may be. And so as far as establishing these microfarms or small gardens, this is an act of liberation, right? And in addition, it's an act of establishing a homeland duality, cultivating food gardens here in the United States, where it would make them feel more rooted in the United States, but at the same time, remain connected to their old homeland of Vietnam, right? And so maintain their Vietnamese roots, right? And in regards to food sovereignty, by having the opportunity and the opportunity and ability to cultivate these food gardens, they could maintain, right, their traditional foodways, and in addition, they would have the capability to have some control over what they consume, right? So in other words, food sovereignty, right? Have some sovereignty over what they can grow and consume, and also pass on down to the next generation. And then as far as culinary citizenship, of course, it's not citizenship, legal citizenship per se, but by establishing culinary citizenship, this is where you have Vietnamese American home gardeners who would have the ability to, or have the opportunity to be not only using their herbs, vegetables, and fruits to make Vietnamese dishes and expand Vietnamese cuisine here in the United States, but also be able to, by working the land, right, feel more rooted here in the United States. In other words, by working the land, working the soil, they have a right to belong here, right? So it gives them a greater sense of belonging, even as they long for Vietnam, their home country of Vietnam, and what they missed in Vietnam. And so that's what I mean by culinary citizenship, right? The right to belong here, particularly those who worked the land for years and years. And so this would give them a greater sense of belonging. All right. Now, in this quote, I won't read the whole thing, but again, just to reiterate about how culinary citizenship would take hold, and in addition, how food democratizes us, right? And so in the end, imagine, when we open up our minds, as often as we do with food, what other transformative wonders and possibilities, advancements await us, right? And so food connects us. Food connects us, right? Food binds us. Food brings us all to the table, right? And so there's the democratization of food, right? And so you have, for regards to Vietnamese cuisine, in particularly say in Texas, more specifically in Houston, you have the growing popularity of Vietnamese cuisine, right? I always like to say, well, burgers today, but maybe banh mi tomorrow. We'll see. And as we all know, right, immigrants and refugees throughout U.S. history have always brought their own foodways. So this is nothing new, right? Yes, as far as Vietnamese foodways, it's they have their own uniqueness, right? But it's nothing new. I mean, you go back to Italian immigrants, you go back to Jewish immigrants and Irish immigrants and immigrants from China and Japan and West Africa, etc. You have these food traditions, right? Food practices, in this case, cultivating food gardens in times of great uncertainty, all right? I mentioned Japanese Americans. I mean, even during their incarceration during World War II, Japanese Americans would cultivate food gardens, right? At a variety of different internment camps or imprisonment camps where they would cultivate food gardens on their own victory gardens, right? And so this is nothing new. And then in the epilogue of our book, I do briefly reference the Congolese refugees, refugees from the two Congos, as well as refugees from Syria here in Houston, cultivating their own food gardens in their own apartment complexes. And so this tradition continues on with newer, more recent arrivals. Okay, all right. Now, as far as home gardens of the Vietnamese diaspora, so for those who are fortunate enough to have their lives resettled here in the United States, in other places, food gardens would serve as home gardens. Again, so these are small places that would serve as places of sanctuary. And in some cases, like and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but in some cases you have where Vietnamese American food gardens would have a little banta right in the middle of the garden, a little altar, right? And that they would place the fruits that they've grown on that small altar right in the middle of the garden. And so these gardens become sacred spaces as well, okay? And so you have food gardens as home gardens, and some of the common vegetables, herbs, fruit trees that they would cultivate, just to run by this real quickly here. You have water spinach, raw muang, which is very popular, variety of mints, raw tum, dobap, which I really love, winter melons, bidao, mustard greens, chili peppers, you know, papayas, and white eggplants, gafao, that's used to add flavor to the fish sauce and make it to nick chum, dipping sauce. And of course, my favorite bitter melons. That's commonly cultivated as well. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and I forgot to keep track of time. I'm sorry, but let me go ahead and go through these photos fairly quickly. So here you have my mom's. My friend's mom, who had a huge, nice garden when they lived in Pearland, and as you can see, just the enormity of these papayas. And I know she's standing more towards the back, and the papayas are actually close to the front. So there's a little distortion of the scale here, but nonetheless, it's still amazing, right? It's still amazing. And then bitter melons. So Vietnamese love bitter melons, except me, but it's commonly eaten and again, by cultivating such produce, they could make a variety of Vietnamese dishes that they love to consume. This one's a photo of my father, my niece, and my parents have their own food garden. When I was younger, I wasn't mature enough to be cognizant of the fact that these food gardens give them tremendous joy. And so when I was little, I didn't become aware of that. And I was also a little unsure and also a little just a little perplexed that they would spend a lot of time in the backyard as well as the front yard to cultivate a variety of produce and give most of them away to friends, relatives, and fellow churchgoers. And so I thought that was amazing. But I didn't, when I was young, I didn't think much of it, right? But now, looking back, I realized how much home gardening means to them, and they could still, despite the fact that they've been long retired and they're in their early 80s, late 70s, they still have a food garden of their own where they would cultivate dobap, okra, as well as gayat, chili peppers, and so on. Okay, and then moving along. So one of the things they not this year, but they've grown in the past is gafao, white eggplants or African eggplants. And this is in Arlington. My mother-in-law's friends. As you can see, their entire backyard is just replete with different kinds of produce, from chili peppers to white eggplants to a variety of gourds hanging off of trusses that are, gourds are being diapered, right, just to make sure that they'll mature and won't fall off the vines. And so, oftentimes they would use, whatever pieces of cloth, or even whatever materials they could find, like PVC pipes to make a trellis. And so they're being very resourceful as well in cultivating such gardens. So in our photo, the same garden. So you have this nice trellis in the backyard, and my mother-in-law and her friend walking underneath the trellis. And I'm sure you can see, but there's some bitter melons here, as well as I believe some winter melons. And then this is a photo of my mother-in-law. So obviously, she's very proud of what she has cultivated, and rightfully so. And I love this photo because I always like to joke that she's obviously more proud of her home garden than she is of her son-in-law. And so You can tell how much she loves to garden, how much she likes to cultivate such produce. Right? And here she's pictured with winter melon, which you make ganbi. Okay. And then as far as my wife's grandmother, she she used to live here in Grand Prairie, Texas, and she would pitch in and help with the home garden in the backyard as well. Here picking some chili peppers. Now she's in Quang Ngai, Vietnam, and she's 99 years old this year. So she's still alive, and we miss her dearly. All right, so in regards to Vietnamese refugees and their food gardens, and going back to the idea of, going back to how they are viewed as perpetual foreigners or outsiders. And so you have this visibility and invisibility, right, of Vietnamese refugees. And again, this is nothing new. I mean, throughout U.S. history, unfortunately, you have the visibility and invisibility of, again, Italian immigrants, Jewish immigrants, Chinese immigrants, Japanese immigrants, etc., right? And so this quote is actually from one of the novels I really love by Letty Diem Thuy, who lowercase is her name. And the title of the novel is The Gangster We Are Looking For. And I thought this quote really just, well, for me, it really hit home. And so the quote is, "It is hot and dusty where we live. Some people think it's dirty, but they don't know much about us. They haven't seen our gardens full of lemongrass, mint, cilantro, and basil. Driving by with their windows rolled up, they've only seen the pigeons pecking at day-old rice and the skinny cats and dogs sitting in the skinny shade of skinny trees. Haven't seen the berries that we pick, that turn our lips and fingers red." So there lies that visibility and invisibility, right, of immigrants and refugees to this very day, unfortunately. And I mean, it's just the ongoing racism that continues to this day, and this idea of immigrants, refugees, they're eating our cats and dogs, and it's just really just awful and grotesque and just terrible, right? And so you have to this day, particularly with what's happening to undocumented immigrants, right? Particularly if they have brown skin, right? And it's just really awful and sad to see this going on today, and perhaps for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. And so there lies, that invisibility of immigrants and refugees and what they contribute and what they bring with them to this country and what they experience back home due to U.S. involvement in those countries, right? So the U.S. was there, so therefore we are here, right? And so we have to keep that in mind, right? That there's this linear path of immigrants and refugees, but a more circuitous path, right? And so we have to keep that in mind as well. All right. So the reason why I use that quote, not just for this presentation, but in my book, is because it reminds me of the Vietnamese villages in Southeast Houston, in the Park Place neighborhood, and Hobby Airport, yeah. And this is a working class neighborhood, and on the outside, strangers may see, these are rundown complexes and condominiums. Who would want to live there, right? So sort of a degrading, obviously, perspective and a patronizing perspective on those who reside there. But the more I look into them and the more I visited them, the more I admire them. I admire the residents who live in these lang or villages, like Tai Xuan, Dalat, Saigon, Hue, Tan Tam, and St. Joseph. Okay? So for now, at least there are 6 Vietnamese villages remaining. I think of the one time there were 8, suggesting a Promenade Village as well as Promenade Village as well as St. Mary's Village. And when you visit these villages, there's a plethora of gardens everywhere, right? Yeah, so as Dr. Romero knows, it's amazing. And I find that remarkable, not only because of the demonstration of being resourceful and resilient, but just being so creative in how they cultivate such gardens. And so let me just go ahead and show you a few more photos. So these gardens, no matter how modest or small they may be, they're quite beautiful. So these gardens not only serve as spaces where they would sometimes have a banta, right, a small altar in honor of the ancestors, and not only as spaces where they would cultivate food items that they would consume, but in addition, these gardens help beautify their landscapes, right? Help beautify the older, worn-out buildings that they live in, right? And so you have the beautification of these villages, right? And so here, St. Joseph Village. Oh, I'm sorry. The previous photo was Bakfuk, from Thai Swan Village. A lovely woman, and she was very kind to us as we talked to her. And then this one from St. Joseph Village. And some of these gardens are just beautiful. Again, they may be small, but you can see they're nicely, manicured and placed. And as a result, you have, just again a plethora of these small gardens throughout these villages. And in this one, you see in some cases some gardens that would grow along stairs and handrails. And here, this is, I believe, bitter melons being cultivated along the stairs here. And so again, just using whatever limited spaces they have to cultivate these beautiful gardens. Okay, and in some areas they have for those who face those who live in buildings that face a common space, they would transform a common space into a small micro farm or community garden, such as this one. And going back to being resourceful, right? You have in this case. A gardener utilizing grocery carts and old political signs, right, campaign signs, to protect the garden from too much sunlight. And so here you have a little potted garden right underneath the stairs. And this one here you have a community garden in a common space and along the sidewalk. And again, a variety of produce being cultivated there at Tantam Village. And then I mentioned PVC pipes, right? Utilizing whatever items you could find, in this case using PVC pipes to make a trellis and grow loofahs. Okay. And in regards to this quote, my wife and I, we love hiking. We enjoy hiking, and so we try to visit the national parks and the state parks whenever we can. And so we learn things like, nurse logs. And I never heard of nurse logs until, the past 10 years. And the nurse logs, as you can read here, analogous to a nurse log, a fallen tree that provides some of the essential ingredients for seedlings to grow. Home gardens provide a necessary growing medium that is more sustainable for the Vietnamese diaspora to retain their community and culture and strength and identity, and impart knowledge and identity as their lives take root in the United States, which also roots the reimagined homeland and memory and post-memory for me and the next generation, for generations of Vietnamese Americans. And so, in regards to going back to my parents and their generation, even though they lost the homeland, even though they lost their country and lost the war, and lost many of their children and relatives and friends, they nonetheless act as a growing medium for my generation and future generations, where they continue to nurse us and nurture us, right? And oftentimes they would nurse and nurture us by cultivating these food gardens and making delicious Vietnamese homemade dishes that's organic and fresh and fulfilling and nurturing, right, to us all. And so, as a result, when I think of my parents, I think of them as many things, just many incredible things, but also as nurse logs that continue to nurture myself and my siblings and future generations, despite the losses they endure. All right, and then this quote, towards the end of the book, I talk about the three main themes of the book: food sovereignty, culinary citizenship, and homeland duality. And just to read the second part of the quote, these home gardens, small farms function as places of religious and, sacred observance, sorry for the typo, represent sustainable practices and cultural preservation, encourage physical health and spiritual well-being, build community, interpersonal relationships, and create food security, culinary freedom, and finally, home. Okay, and so these little gardens, right, are those spaces of home that they manage to cultivate and nurture and grow, not just for themselves, but also for future generations. All right, and then just real briefly, just some direct quotes from some of the people I was fortunate to interview. When Vietnam, quote, there's an effort to preserve and extend the traditions of our ancestors. Hoàng Quang, the father of my good friend's son, gardening makes you live close to nature. It makes life more beautiful. So gardening is also an activity to improve your, not just physical health, but also mental health, right? It gives them tremendous joy, right, to cultivate such gardens, particularly as they watch their produce grow. And then the next one, gardening gives us a greater sense of our mother country. That's from my father. And my personal favorite from mother-in-law, Chen Ti Lung, when I put Vietnamese veggies, herbs, and fruits in my mouth, that is very special to me. When I eat them, I feel like I have Vietnamese spirit in my mouth. They all taste so good to me, especially the food from my garden. And so I thought that quote was, wow, just really amazing, really powerful, and beautiful. And the last one from my mother-in-law, again, gardening is for relaxation after a long day of working, or to see the day with new things growing in the backyard. But the best is to share with our friends and relatives. So gardening is a communal act as well. And so you have not just my mother-in-law, but my parents and aunts and uncles that would oftentimes exchange, well, the fruits of the labor, right? And exchange the herbs and vegetables and fruits and give them away. Or they will also exchange gardening tips and seeds. And so it's a communal act that brings well, in the case of my parents, there's their close knit Southeast neighborhood community together. All right, and then finally the last portion. I'm sorry if I exceeded my time limit. As far as the last portion of today's talk, I want to talk about transnational food connections. And so I've been fortunate to visit Vietnam on a few occasions now. I'm up for 3 summers in a row, and I wasn't surprised to see Vietnamese food gardens there at all, because they were everywhere, including at the homes of Nong's relatives. And we were there to visit her relatives and her 99-year-old grandmother, and we saw these beautiful food gardens everywhere. And so this food tradition or food practice obviously remains prevalent today in Vietnam. And one of the things that they would cultivate, well, one of the things would be, if you look at the far left, jackfruit. And this is from Vietnam's home garden in Quang Ngai, Vietnam, which is in central Vietnam. And there you have jackfruit being cultivated. And now another Aunt Zibai gave us some jackfruit to eat, jackfruit that she cultivated in her own backyard, in her own food garden. And so, and it was delicious. And so there's this ongoing, there are these ongoing transnational food connections, right, between the Vietnamese diaspora and the Vietnamese people in Vietnam. All right, so in conclusion, gardening serves as places of nurturing, healing, freedom from the violent disruptions of war, displacement, relocation, racialization. As mentioned before, gardening is a communal act, and not just a personal, private act. And gardening encourages wellness and farm-to-table practice that improves their both physical and mental health. And gardening is a working class ethos, right, as you've witnessed in those Vietnamese villages along in the working class neighborhoods of Southeast Houston. Gardening is also a political act, right, to secure fresh food, reclaim food sovereignty, resist dominant food processes, right, and preserve and expand their own Vietnamese foodways. And gardening serves as an act of longing and belonging, right? Belonging here, not just, but also longing for their homeland of Vietnam. And finally, gardening serves as roots to food sovereignty, homeland duality, and culinary citizenship. So that ends my presentation for today. And again, I apologize if I exceeded my time. Thank you for being here. Any questions or comments or gardening tips? If you could help me.
Just out of curiosity, are there differences in the things that grow here versus what you can grow? Has this changed over time, what people grow and how they incorporate it into their food in the community because they're here in a different climate and different circumstances?
That's an excellent question, Dr. Boyd. The Dr. Boyd, in case you don't know, she's one of my just phenomenal professors at U of H, just incredible mentor. Can't do that. I wouldn't be here without her or Dr. Melosi or Dr. Ipman. So it's just, I don't know. It's I'm in pure joy right now to see you all. And great question. Well, I'm hoping to take sabbatical next year because I do want to explore that. So I'm afraid I don't have enough knowledge to answer that question. I'm sorry, but for what I witnessed, jackfruit is grown in not just Houston, but also my aunt from Florida. She grows jackfruit. And so the climate is very similar, right? Hot, humid, and long summers. So sweating profusely walking from the Hilton Hotel to here. And so the climate is very similar. And so a lot of things, that are cultivated there, like what we saw, loofahs and bitter melons, are growing here as well. And And a lot of these things I also discovered along the way. Again, I'm not a food historian, but it's just a lot of just universal or that are universally grown. Like mustard greens and bitter. Mustard greens and okra, for instance. I mean, for American historians, being trained as an Asian American historian now, I would think, okay, so that's very popular in the South, but obviously it's popular in Vietnam too. And then cilantro, right? Cilantro is popular among Vietnamese food gardeners, but it's also popular throughout Latin America. And so there are a lot of universal themes here, right? And I think that's what I was trying to articulate in this book, and to get closer to the truth, is to come to this realization that the immigrants and refugees before the Vietnamese and after the Vietnamese, guess what? They all have their own unique food gardens. So that's a question I hope to further explore if I get my sabbatical approved. Others?
First, thank you for that talk.
Oh, thank you.
This project. My question is about what it's like to work on a project like this where you're so closely connected. And I feel like that close connection is what makes it so significant and beautiful, honestly, and like lends this incredibly emotional impact to the work, which I feel, as having studied history for as long as I have, is different than perhaps when an author has different kind of relationship to the material, or like separation. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like to work on this project that you're so connected to, and was the weight of it ever overwhelming? How was it throughout?
No, thank you for an excellent question. There's a certain weight to it, but at the same time, I try my best to focus on, okay, it's not about me, it's about my parents, and it's about them, right? And how to best tell their stories, to make sure to get their stories right and accurate, right? Even as their memories fade, right? And so it's important as a historian that, we do try our best to, of course, keep our distance, but we're human too. And so I in the book, I did include a few little personal stories, like the story of Thanksgiving, for instance, where, of course, my parents, when they first arrived, they didn't know what Thanksgiving is, and so we lived in a modest abode in Southeast Houston, and long story short, they didn't know what turkey is, and at the time, we never really thought about buying a turkey for Thanksgiving, so my parents made a Vietnamese American dish called gà hấp lò, which is basically roasted chicken. So they bought 2 small chickens, and we ate that for Thanksgiving. And these chickens would be stuffed with cilantro and clear glass noodles, and so Vietnamese style Thanksgiving. And so for me, including such stories, I think, or at least I hope, give us a better idea of their experience, right? Of being uprooted and then trying to establish their roots here, but yet, maintain their Vietnamese roots, right? And then just going back to Vietnamese food history, right? I mean, yes, there are Chinese and French influences, right? Like the banh mi, for instance, and pho, and those are important influences. I don't want to take anything away from the Chinese and French influence on Vietnamese cuisine, but these are also Vietnamese dishes, right? So in other words, it's the Vietnamese home cooks and chefs and food gardeners who help create and preserve and expand our Vietnamese foodways. And so this is hopefully a nice homage to all of them. Thank you.
Hi, just a quick question. I wanted to ask, was there a moment, because you said that you weren't an expert in this.
No, I'm not.
Was there a moment where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to go forward with? Because I know in research you might have like different pathways that you might choose from. So I'm just curious if there was, what made you decide this is what I'm going to go into, this is what I'm going to focus on?
Big thanks and shout out to my wife and again, going back to my parents. They're obviously very influential in my life, and my siblings. My brother Byron, who I first informed that, hey, I'm going to be a history major. What do you think? And he supported me all the way. And so without his support, I probably wouldn't have been a history major. As it's an Asian American joke. The Asian American parents want their kids to be, in a medical field or a legal field, become a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer. Definitely not a historian. And so it's, for me, it's just, just hearing their stories, right, over and over, and just seeing, and again, when I was little, I wasn't mature enough to realize and recognize their daily activities, particularly my mom, of cooking and gardening, with my dad, and just every day doing that. I didn't think much of it until much later, right? And so I came to a realization that it's important to make an effort to try to make sure that their stories get told, right? And I always like to say that history never ends until every story is told, and it's important to make sure that their stories get told in some form or fashion, right? And so to me, that was the drive. That was that's a major driving force for me to try to write this book and try to research it well and try to make sure that it's coherent enough and clear and concise enough for readers to appreciate. And so I would say my parents, my wife, my siblings, all of them, my aunts and uncles, and so again the way I try to make sure is the focus should always be on them, not on me. I'm just a historian. I'm just an outside observer. That's it.
Hi. So I have a two-part question. The first part is, do you find that some of these gardens and communities, are they located in like some sort of a food desert? Does that spawn the necessity to grow them? And the second part of that question is, through your research, has it inspired you to garden more?
Excellent questions. The second question, no. It's hard. It's challenging, and I just don't have the intuition and the built-in knowledge. I mean, I'm not trying to make excuses. I mean, I will give it another shot. Try, but I have a hard time keeping domestic plants alive, and so, I mean, I should try again for sure. But as far as the first question, go back to food deserts. I mean, particularly Vietnamese refugees, like my parents, and I'm sure Christina's parents. I mean, when they resettled in Houston, right? That again, there weren't any large Asian grocery stores, right? And so they would, they had to be resourceful, right? And find whatever they could, whatever seeds they could find at, Vietnamese nurseries or from Vietnam, and use whatever resources they have to cultivate these food gardens, right? And so it's so in a way that's for them that's a food desert in a way, right? That they don't have immediate access to raw tum and raw muong and all of that, and so they have to cultivate such things on their own. And so in a way, that's a not traditional food desert per se, but a food desert for Vietnamese refugees who came here with very little access to such produce. Yeah, great questions.
Hi.
Hi.
I just have a few questions because I'm also Vietnamese myself, but I was born here and my parents are from Vietnam. They're born a little bit after the war, and so growing up, I do relate to this lecture by a lot.
Oh,
it
thank you.
takes me home, and I was like growing up. I wonder why there's always a lot of older Vietnamese people, like always having these gardens. It is not only in their homes in the backyards as well. They actually like sell the fruits and vegetables not only in in the community, but also in a church setting. Because I always see after mass every Sunday, I always see there's these I guess ingredient sales. It's always bitter melon, mustard greens, gourds, and I was wondering why there's just basically a whole garden, and well, personally connecting to this, my mom also has a home garden too in her yard, so it's pretty funny. I was just wondering what made the home garden so culturally significant, whether it's regardless of history even, like what kind of, I guess, cultural connection to Vietnamese diaspora and Vietnamese in general, like, I guess, but just like a whole concept.
Well, and thank you for being here, and thank you for your question. I appreciate it, and sharing a little bit about your personal family's history. So it's on one hand, it's an act of joy, and it's an act of love, right? And when they grow, these variety of gourds and herbs, but at the same time, it's also an essential act, right? To live, right, and to not only survive, but hopefully one day thrive, right? And so for, whether in Vietnam or in refugee camps or here in the United States, for Vietnamese refugees, for people like our parents and your parents, they cultivate these gardens because it gives them tremendous joy, right? In addition, for those who would give or sell their produce, homemade produce or homegrown produce, that's a communal act, right? It allows them to, gives them an opportunity to socialize, right, and make some connections with other Vietnamese diasporans, right? And so I find that, as far as going back to cultural connections, it's again what may be perceived as a simple act, right, is actually a very essential one. For many of them, right? For our parents and yours. And so as a result, that's so vital, particularly, imagine coming, I just can't imagine. I mean, I thought my life was precarious, as a graduate student and just trying to make it as a history major. But boy, and I'm sure your parents have told, well, hopefully they share some stories of just their, what they had to endure to be here. It's just, think about my parents, they live with such precarity, right? And such tremendous loss that, in regards to, going back to the quotes from my mother-in-law, Vietnamese spirit in my mouth, right? So it's just, it brings them home, right? When they grow, particularly when they consume the food that they grow, right? It hits home to them, right? And so it's just very, that culture connection is very important. It's very vital, right? And so as a result, these are again not just acts of joy and love, but also essential acts to survive and hopefully thrive. Yeah. Thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, thank you so much for that.
Thank
I
you.
was curious, I noticed a lot of, or like all the photos you showed of the gardens, of the people with the gardens they tend to be like on the older side, and I'm curious how, like, do you fear the loss of this really sacred tradition among Vietnamese Americans? And like, what does that say about the greater struggle for immigrant communities to hold on to their identity, like in the face of assimilation in the U.S.? Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. Another excellent question. Thank you so much. Yes, as far as, if you can see through these photos, yeah, there's certainly a pattern, right? That you have older Vietnamese Americans who would cultivate such gardens. Now, again, I'm not a gardener, but I do have cousins like, from my father's side, like Tina, for instance. I was able to connect with her, and during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, she has just bought a house, and long story short, having to stay at home, she decided to try to cultivate a food garden on her own. And she's much younger than I am. And so she was able to get a lot of gardening tips from her parents, and ultimately she was able to cultivate her own food garden in her backyard. And so even though for my generation and younger generations, yeah, you don't see a prevalence of gardeners, right, among younger Vietnamese Americans. But I do see that there are cases like my cousin Tina, who has an invested interest in cultivating a food garden, a food garden that contains produce that's akin to being grown in Vietnam. And so hopefully that continues on. I mean, I don't know. And so I guess I'm sorry I can't answer that question. But I hope that there'll be more examples like Tina, right? And the next generation too. And so we'll see. We just have to wait and see. And hopefully it's not, like the Vietnamese language, right? So as a second generation, I remember my first language was Vietnamese. I mean, we spoke Vietnamese at home, and so we spoke Vietnamese to mom and dad. But then when I started kindergarten and started learning English, I began to lose my Vietnamese proficiency and fluency, and I regret that. I mean, I can only basically have Vietnamese conversations, right? So conversational Vietnamese is my level of fluency, but no, that's it. And so hopefully, in regards to gardening, right, particularly growing produce that Vietnamese people love to eat and consume and share, hopefully it doesn't go away. And so just like language, hopefully the Vietnamese language and the Vietnamese food ways, like home gardening, would continue to exist and grow. Thank you.
Any other questions? Will you join me in thanking Dr. Vu?
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
One more round of applause for Dr. Vu. This was a terrific, terrific talk. So I have several thank yous. Obviously, thank you to Dr. Vu for the talk. Thank you to Iggy Harrison and his team at UH Streaming Media for their help in recording and streaming the panel. Thank you to Dr. Wes Jackson at the Center for Public History, who is the secret sauce to making all of these events happen. Thank you to our research assistant in Center for Public History, Michael Voss, who also plays a very important role in making our events happen. If you are interested in learning more about the Center for Public History and our upcoming events, please visit our website at uh.edu/class/CPH. Our next event will be Wednesday, November the 12th, with author Curtis Chin discussing his award-winning memoir, Everything I Learned in a Chinese Restaurant. Please register and plan to attend. It promises to be a very dynamic talk, and after Curtis Chin gives his remarks, we'll have Dr. Romero again and Dr. Melody Lee from Modern and Classical Languages in conversation with Curtis Chin about the topic. So yes, there is all of that. At CPH, we rely on the generous support of people like you who are committed to supporting public-facing research projects and presentations like we have enjoyed tonight. If the spirit moves you and you wish to support the Center for Public History, you can do so by going to giving.uh.edu/public history, all one word, where you would click donate and give a donation to the Welcome Wilson Houston History Collaborative. Thank you for being here with us this evening.
Yes.
And one more round of thanks.
Oh my goodness. Oh, thank you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Have a good night, everyone, and come back and see us on the 12th for Curtis Chin.